Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're getting back into our talks of Joshua Williamson's 2021 Robin series, where it's combat time all the time. But then also, like, with the way that this story's been playing out, like at least up to this point, I feel like this series could quite possibly change Damian in a significant way going forward. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch us spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so when we jump back in, not long after Damian had discovered some of the secrets of Lazarus Island, it was then shortly after when he ran into Rose, who had not only caught Damian off guard to prove her point, but also attempt to help Damian out because she's not here for the tournament. But with Rose suggesting to Damian that she could help him, she also suggested that she could do this by training him, and lesson number 1 for Damian was how to have fun. But of course, to all three of these things, Damian was a bit apprehensive because he doesn't believe he needs her help, he definitely doesn't think he needs her training, and from Damian's perspective, having fun isn't the way to win a tournament. And when Rose and Damian approach the others, Damian quickly gets the vibe that he's not wanted there. And the kid XXL, like, he's the first one to verbally make it known, which almost puts Damian into combat mode, even though the tournament rules are no fighting after dark. But before they get into it, Rose pulls Damian away, and she more or less tells him to stick to the assignment, which is about how to have fun. And she even admits herself that she's always hated the homework part, but for Damian, while they're studying in the field, so to speak, she then gives Damian an assignment just for the night, and that assignment is to make a friend. And even though on the surface it sounds kind of corny, like what Rose is talking about, but when she explains it, it starts to sound like exactly what Damian needs. Because with him coming out here and getting to know the other contestants, he'll also learn about them, like what they do to unwind. And aside from Damian learning about these other opponents, Rose then lets him know like he needs to learn how to unwind himself. Because sometimes fighting is about being quick on your feet, but she also lets him know that a good fighter knows how to loosen up, which is exactly what Damian was not in the last issue when Rose caught him reading manga, because he was very uptight about her finding out. And when Rose says this flat line, she overhears like the last part, and she asks Damian like, you read manga too? And then she also figures that that's why Damian ditched her by the huge Lazarus pit rather than him leaving from her to come here, and she tells him like, I know you would never be caught dead at a party. And she says it kind of jokingly with him, though she's kind of pushing it because she did rip his heart out. But they're saying this and her constantly trying to befriend Robin. Like, once again, and I know I said it before, but I gotta say it again, like it really feels like she's crushing on the kid. And I wouldn't be surprised if we got that reveal in one way or another at some time in the future. But then it's here where they approach this table. We have a couple of other guys playing that game where you kind of put the knife between your fingers as fast as you can. And I'm pretty sure there's a name for it, I can't remember it right now, but I don't play like that, I respect my phalanges. But while they're approaching this table, Rose kind of tells Flatline like, never mind Robin, he doesn't know how to take a joke. And with Rose saying that, Flatline's just like, well, that's kind of the thing, like what would Robin want here? And when Flatline says that, Robin, he more or less is like, I'll tell you what I want a stunt. And when he says this, he snatches 5 kunai off of the table and he slaps his hand on the table and he just tosses them up in the air. And when he does, Rose is like, Damian? And Flatline's just like, no way. And Damian just looks over with a wink like, yeah, I'm him. Better ask somebody. And when they land, of course, they land one next to each finger and below the knuckle for extra points. But for a lot of these guys here, like they've never seen this kind of precision up close in person. And so when they see them land and Damian's not even looking, they freaking lose it. And when this happens, everybody starts to make more friendly with Robin. And they're like, okay, like this kid, he's all right. And they start asking all these weird questions. Like, is it true that you locked up a bunch of bad guys in a homemade prison? Which, I mean, it kind of depends on who you're asking that question to. Because the person who would do that, you're either Batman or the Jigsaw killer. But when they then mention, like, we've heard stories about you, like, why would you hang out with a bunch of killers like us? And it's right then where Damian hears the voice of Alfred say that, hey, that's a good question. Like, is this really the crowd that you want to hang around? But Damian more or less shuts it down because he's not really trying to hear his conscience at this moment. But the thing is, like here, like once the ice is broken and everybody starts to open up, and from there it kind of turns into this competition of times I ran across Batman kind of thing. Because at first you got Constantine Drakon, who's like, I went up against Batman, we went toe to toe, but he was pissed and he shattered my jaw. And Flatline is like, Batman has beat up Lord Deathman so many times. And from there it just steamrolls into a conversation that doesn't even allow Damian to get a word in. And because of that, Damian kind of wanders off, but some of these comments are a bit funny though. Because one dude's like, I saw him pound the Riddler while solving a riddle. Which, I mean, hey, it's like that when you're trying to get those Riddler trophies. But then somebody else, and we don't see who said it, but somebody was like, man, you ever see him chase Catwoman? Get a room, right? And I mean, like, we don't know what instance that person was talking about, but most likely it was one of those times when Batman was just doing what heroes do, I guess, because they can do things when they chase the cat. But in the case of Damian, when we see him wander off, he goes towards the statue of Mother Soul. And when he goes there to just look at it, like, somebody approaches him from behind and they tell him that they used to sacrifice people here. And when Damian turns around to see who it is, it's Connor Hawke. And as he continues to go on, he tells Robin, like, I know you can feel it too. Like, whoever lived on this island before Mother Soul and the League of Lazarus, they used this island for sacrifices to their gods. And you can tell by the everlasting smell of blood and the feeling of death that just lingers here. And when Damian sees Connor, he initially just thinks of the thing that Rose said about Connor being his greatest competition. And he lets Connor know, like, we're not supposed to fight at night, but if you want to go, we can. But as it turns out, Connor's not here for that. And much like Damian, Connor came out here to clear his head. But with Connor hearing all the noises on the beach, he didn't know what they were because he's never really been one to just socialize. But then it's also here where Damian asks Connor, like, he's studied with the League of Shadows before Connor, and before Connor was never with them. And because of that, he asked Connor, like, why are you with them now? Which is something that kind of made me sit forward because I want to know too. But Connor tells Damian that they found them when no one else could or would, and they helped Connor, retrain Connor, and they gave him a purpose, which then leads Connor to tell him, like, hey, we got quite a bit in common, you know, with both of their dads being heroes. And Damian's just like, oh man, did your dad not know about you when you were raised by your mother? And Connor's just like, worse, my daddy held me on the day I was born. And he ran. But aside from that, like, both of their parents died and came back in one way or another. They both got a thing for themed vehicles. And when Connor asked, like, does your dad have a cave? And Damian's like, he used to, referring to Joker War. And Connor just responds like, same here, referring to his dad's origin on a deserted island. And with having this conversation, like, it just points out so many more similarities than differences between the two. And especially when Connor's like, my dad has a thing for fishnets, which is very understandable. And from there, Damian's then like, well, yeah, my dad has a thing for whips and leather. And man, I don't blame him either, because, you know, at the end of the day, these are the things that heroes are into, and heroes do the things that heroes are supposed to do. And that's all I'm gonna say. I'm just gonna leave that right there. But while Connor and Damian are out here talking, the League of Shadows then approach Connor, and they're kind of like, hey man, what you doing, man? You gotta tighten up. We in the middle of a death match, and you out here just to geeking with the fallen sun, man, get up. But when they get here and they get up close and they confront Connor, Damian, he immediately recognizes Master Dusk because he's one of Damian's trainers when he was younger. But that previous work experience for Master Dusk is kind of something that he leaves off of his resume, because he essentially got fired by Talia al Ghul for throwing a young Damian to the wolves, literally as a part of his training. But the thing with Dusk, like, he holds a gripe against Damian because he believes Damian's too much like his mother and his father, and even though he had hoped for Damian to become the greatest weapon, to where instead Damian went on with his father, and then after that in his own direction, and because of that he considers Damian to be the greatest failure. And you can kind of tell, like in the case of Master Dusk at least, that with taking in Connor Hawke, he's hoping to have a version of what Damian should have been in his perspective. But with this happening, and even though it's night, Master Dusk, he tells Connor to prove his loyalty to the Shadows, ordering Connor to fight him even though it's against the tournament rules. And when this happens, Connor's just like, I'm sorry, Robin, and the two of them throw down. But this fight is ended pretty quickly when Connor tries to sweep Damian, and Damian just jumps over it, but then Connor grabs his cape and slams Damian into the ground, head freaking first. And after this, Connor gets ready to toss Damian off of the cliff. But even with this happening, Master Dusk, he's expecting Damian to live from this, because with the way that the tournament is set up, you only get healed if you're being resurrected, like if you die. And Master Dusk, he wants Damian to survive so he can live with this pain. But the crazy thing is, like, when Connor throws Damian off this cliff, he calls to his dad, he calls to Alfred, and with doing this, it's almost in a way of him saying, like, either he's sorry or he realizes that he needs them. But before you know it, Damian is just whooshed away, and all Damian hears is someone saying that I have you, son. And they catch him just before he goes slamming into the water and the rocks. And when this happens right after we see Damian in the morning, bandaged up, being looked after, and as he wakes up, he's in relief because he's like, you found me. But when he calls for father, as it turns out, this wasn't Bruce, because this wasn't his father. It was actually his grandfather, Ra's al Ghul. And when I seen this, I was thinking like, man, what's a man like you doing in a place like this? And then I thought about it, and then I was like, yeah, you would be here. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below to where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.